Good evening. It's 4 o'clock. I think we'll get started. Our mayor, Juan Diego Wade, is not here tonight, so I will be leading us as we go tonight. So if we could get started, please. So the June 17th, 2024 Charlottesville City Council meeting will come to order. Ms. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Councilor Oshron?
Here.
Councilor Payne?
Here.
Vice Mayor Pinkston?
Here.
Councilor Snook?
Here.
So we have an agenda in front of us, and the first question I have is, I understand there was a notion to amend the agenda. Is that still the case?
Yes, I would like to remove item number 10 from the consent agenda and add it to the end of our action items for the regular portion of the meeting.
A second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to amend. I think all in favor, aye, we'll go with that.
Aye.
Amendment. And then I guess we need to vote on the amended agenda, is that correct? Or was
It's fine to do
Just-
it all in that one motion.
Got it, okay,
If
great.
that's the only change.
So we have an amended agenda in front of us, and I think we need to cast our vote. Okay, so this meeting will be divided into 3 sections. The first is a work session to hear and discuss presentations that do not require a council vote. The second is a closed meeting. And the third will be the city council business meeting, which starts at 6:30 p.m. But first, we're going to hear a report on the state of homelessness in Charlottesville. So we're grateful for all of you that are here tonight to speak to us. As I understand it, the presentation will be led by Ms. Misty Graves and Shayla Washington, who's the executive director of BRAC.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have the honor of kicking off this very robust presentation that has been worked on really hard from folks involved in the continuum of care here in Charlottesville. For my role as the director of the Department of Human Services, as we intersect with the continuum of care, I am one of 2 city members, city staff that are on the BRAC board. And also, we participate in the homelessness system of care by way of a few programs that our Human Services Department has. One being the Pathways program that you all know provides emergency rental and mortgage relief to residents of the city. For this year so far, we're not quite at the end of the fiscal year, but as of today, we've met 1,303 requests for rental relief, mortgage relief, or utility relief, and that totals $1,043,514 to date. Of those 1,300 payments, 338 of those are the utility payments. The rest are going towards housing needs. We hope that this Pathways program continues to prevent eviction and homelessness by way of providing emergency relief financially to those who are in need. The second program that we do that intersects with the continuum of care is housing navigation. So we assist clients who are looking for a more stable housing option. Maybe it's more affordable to meet their current financial resources. And if they have, if they are facing eviction, helping them to navigate the housing market, which is very strained. And so this year we have served 59 clients. 28 of those are already housed. And then there are still currently 19 folks that are working with housing navigation staff right now. And the third way that the Department of Human Services intersects with the system of care is through its emergency hotel stays. So we are able to provide emergency hotel stays for city residents who are extremely medically vulnerable and who are not eligible to go into the existing shelters at either the Salvation Army or Pacham during the winter months. So we were able to serve 36 residents this past fiscal year through our emergency hotel stay program. That's how the city contributes to the success of the continuum, but really it is led by these wonderful individuals here who contribute to that system. So I'm going to hand it off to the executive director, Shayla Washington.
Thank you, Misty.
Thanks, Misty.
Hello, City Council and City Management. Good to see you. My name is Shayla Washington. I'm the Executive Director of the Blue Ridge Area Coalition for the Homeless, also known as BRAC. So if we could advance to the next slide. I'm here today to present to you about the state of homelessness. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm here today to present to you about the state of homelessness in Charlottesville, and I'm joined by fellow colleagues across the sector and in the homelessness sector. So what is BRAC? We are the Continuum of Care Lead Agency as designated by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD. We do homeless services coordination. We work on grants management at the federal, state, and local level for homeless services in Charlottesville and our continuum of care, which includes the counties of Albemarle, Fluvanna, Greene, Louisa, and Nelson. We also make sure that the programs that are implemented for homeless services are of quality management and are being managed and led well. So one of the big things that BRAC does is lead a point-in-time count every fourth Wednesday in January. So you can see on the chart here, the blue line at the top is the number of unsheltered persons that we've seen since 2009. You can see that huge increase in 2022. That was at the height of the Premier Circle project that we were leading on Route 29. We were able to house a lot of folks through that shelter program, and so that was that high number. It did close at the end of June 2023, so that's why you can see that dip. This past point in time count, so in January of this year, we served 126 individuals in shelter. The red line in the middle is transitional housing, so that number has slowly been decreasing over the years, but it's kind of maintained a steady number over the last several years, and we were able to house 14 people in transitional housing through the Shelter for Help and Emergency, the MACA Hope House, other transitional housing projects. And the yellow line at the bottom is unsheltered persons. You can see that there has been a noticeable decrease, since 2023, but the night that we did our point-in-time count this year was really windy, rainy, muddy, so I think a lot of folks who would normally be out that night were probably finding shelter elsewhere.
Can I ask you a question about
Sure.
this? It seems as though if we're thinking that the blue line, I guess I'm trying to figure out, is a peak in the blue line a good thing or a bad thing?
The peak was that we could count more people. They
Yeah.
were in one location. It was easy to provide case management and identify where they were. When they're unsheltered, it's harder to find people and figure out where the campsites are. We know where some known campsites are, but I think a huge part of that is because we knew where everyone was and we could easily account for them in those numbers.
So I guess I was looking at this and thinking 231, gee, that's a bad thing, but then you said, well, the reason was because we knew where they were and they were sheltered, and that was a
Exactly.
good thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm just curious about what use we're supposed to make of these numbers.
Yeah, I think one really helpful thing is having a dedicated site like Premier Circle. We were able to, provide case management, on-site resources. We could bring in, folks from UVA and Centera to do medical care. We could do case management, provide them food and shelter, really. And so I think having one dedicated spot where we knew everyone was, knowing that they could have a roof over their head and it was their own room for the night, really helped with keeping folks safe. Now that Premier Circle is gone, we are waiting for, we're just kind of trying to figure out where people are. And they're kind of scattered all over the city in the urban ring of Albemarle mostly. So harder to identify where folks are unless we have really good relationships in terms of outreach and connection and making sure we know where folks are sleeping at night.
Okay, thank you.
Another thing that BRAC oversees is the by name list, or the BNL. This is a list of everyone we know to be experiencing homelessness. I will add that this includes the counties that I mentioned, Fluvanna, Greene, Nelson, and Louisa, as well as Albemarle. But most people who are on this list are kind of staying in Charlottesville because that's where all the resources are. So from June 1st of 2023 to June 1st of 2024, we saw 498 unique individuals on this list, and approximately 200 are on the list at any given time. For today's date, there are 195 people on the by name list.
That we can access.
Yes. And I should also add that, this is the folks who've come into our system of care and identified that they're experiencing homelessness. Of course, there's probably people sleeping in their cars or sleeping outside that haven't come into, contact with our system of care. So I would estimate it's probably at least 20 more people than that, but potentially more. Another thing that we help partner with, the Haven actually manages the homeless information line, but we can provide the data for it. It's also called the Hill, but this line was created to assist people who are either experiencing homelessness or at risk of imminently experiencing homelessness, which by HUD's definition is 14 days or less. As you can see from the numbers, between June 1st, 2023 to June 1st of this year, we received over 1,300 calls from 587 unique callers. This is about double from what we experienced last year, 755 calls for assistance from 259 unique callers. So clearly the need is there. People are experiencing homelessness at faster rates or becoming, imminently at risk of homelessness at a much faster rate than last year. So how is BRAC addressing the need? We're applying for private funding for a homeless outreach position. Hopefully we can partner with the city to create a second position and have a team of 2 doing homeless outreach services in the downtown area and also in the urban ring of Albemarle. Ideally, if that pilot goes well, we can start doing outreach services in the other counties within our continuum of care as well. We're also creating a lived experience advisory council, which will work alongside our service provider council and provide input from folks who are actually experiencing homelessness to get a better input and advice on how we should be doing our work. We're also engaging with other leads from continuums of care, not only across the state, but across the country for peer learning and support and best practices. And of course, we're always going to be advocating for more emergency shelter beds, more permanent supportive housing, more transitional housing, and truly affordable housing for folks who are at 50% area median income and below. For context, 50% area median income for a household of 1 is about $42,000 a year. A lot of folks who come in through our system of care are between 30 to 50% AMI, so I really think having affordable housing for folks in that income bracket would be really helpful.
Question for you. What is the difference between permanent supportive housing and transitional housing?
Great question. So permanent supportive housing is for folks who have serious mental illness and are experiencing homelessness. That is permanent housing. It comes with case management, and it's really just housing that they can afford for as long as they need it. Transitional housing is intended to be temporary. Most of our transitional housing units through Maca Hope House and the Shelter for Help and Emergency, I think can do like about 2 years or so. But just kind of getting that person on the right track to moving into more permanent housing without the case management supports.
Okay, thank you.
So transitional is temporary and permanent supportive housing is permanent. All right, so if there are no further questions, I'm going to turn it over to Anna Mendez, who is the Executive Director of the Haven.
I'm not being rude. This is my time, my timepiece. I'm going to do my best to keep it to 5 minutes. Good evening or afternoon. My name is Anna Mendez. I have the privilege of being the executive director of the Haven. 2024 is the Haven's 14th year providing year-round low-barrier day shelter here in Charlottesville. I think it's important that we take a minute to define what does it mean to be low-barrier. And for us at the Haven, that means that we offer radical hospitality to anyone in our community who finds their way to us. We do not background check people before we welcome them into the Haven. We do not require that they have reached any type of employment status or any type of sobriety status. I do want to be really clear that the Haven is not a place where people can use alcohol or substances. Doing so is grounds for suspension or barment, but it is a place where people are allowed to safely be if they are already under the influences of those substances, as long as that they can comport themselves in a way that is safe and respectful to everyone. We are open 365 days a year. And this amazing feat is due in large part to a diverse group of community stakeholders led by librarian Jim Barnes in the early aughts, who really wanted Charlottesville to have a shelter where people experiencing homelessness already were, right? Which was downtown near our library. I would also be remiss if I didn't also recognize the amazing support that we get from Hollywood director and producer Tom Shadyac, who actually owns our building and allows us use of it for the express purpose of providing year-round low-barrier day shelter to community members in need. We are at the Haven. We are best known for the day shelter services that we provide in our community. From May of 2023 to May of 2024, we have seen a 24% increase in service access. So over people are accessing Haven services on site in our day shelter over 3,000 times per month. I want to be clear, that's not the same as saying 3,000 unique individuals are coming to the Haven every month, but it means that individuals are coming more than 3,000 times. We serve over 20,000 warm meals every year. We also serve as the legal address of record for over 500 people. Imagine trying to be a member of civil society and not have a place where you can get your mail related to your health insurance benefits or your housing voucher even. What this means is that our staff is sorting, storing, and distributing over 1,300 pounds of mail every single year. I think after the post office in UVA, we probably touch more mail at the Haven than anywhere else in Charlottesville. We also offer free showers and a free laundromat and all of the hygiene items that you could need to either clean yourself or clean your clothes. We also store those bins that you're seeing in the picture behind you. We securely store the personal belongings of over 80 people every year who are experiencing homelessness, and at any given time we have a wait list that is equally long for access to storage space for personal belongings at the Haven. We recognize that one of the values that is really near and dear to us at the Haven is meeting people where they are. We cannot provide every single service that people experiencing homelessness need on a regular basis. So we are really grateful for our partnerships with the City Department of Social Services, who are on site regularly helping people apply for Medicaid and food stamps. We also have a really strong relationship with the Blue Ridge Health District that's doing harm reduction work in our space. And UVA has has a primary care clinic, a substance use disorder treatment clinic, and a psychiatric clinic that are meeting on site at the Haven regularly, open to the public for free. I do want to reiterate that you don't have to be a regular Haven Day Shelter guest to access those clinics. Most of the people who access those clinics are our guests, but those clinics are actually open and available to the public and are hosted at the Haven. Additionally, at the Haven, we are providing information and referral to hundreds of callers every single month who are looking for resources and support. Generally, these are people who some of them are already experiencing homelessness, and the vast majority of them are people who are in incredibly housing insecure situations, and they are being proactive and calling to see what resources and supports are available to them. The mission of the Haven is to end homelessness. We know that people are homeless if they are sleeping outside, if they are sleeping in a structure not fit for human habitation, or if they are sleeping in shelter. Shelter is an incredibly important harm reduction intervention. And what's also true is that people who are in shelter are still people who are experiencing homelessness. And that is why 9 years ago we launched our housing department so that we could actually help house people and move them out of our day shelter. We administer 3 different programs in our housing department. They all have different eligibility and exclusionary criteria. What they all have in common is that we administer them in alignment with the values of Housing First, which means we believe that everyone can thrive in housing and that we offer access to these services without any prerequisite conditions. Someone doesn't need to be employed or have reached a certain level of sobriety in order to be eligible. Through these programs, we are able to help over 200 households each year either exit or prevent the experience of homelessness. That's really, really important and really amazing, but I think the slide that Shayla just showed us also demonstrates like kind of what a drop in the bucket that is. She showed the by name list of on any given day, there are 200 people on our by name list. On any given day, our system has the capacity to provide rapid rehousing services to about 20 of them. So 1/10, right? Like there's an order of magnitude more people in need of that service on any given day than our organization has the capacity to provide. And that is just one of the many reasons we are so grateful for the partnerships that we have with all of these other organizations, because it really is going to take a village to tackle and solve this problem of homelessness. And that concludes my presentation. I think, is Pacham, you're next.
Hello. My name is Liz. I'm here to represent Pacham and just share a little bit about our services, and then I really would like to focus on some data that we have that I think are unique and important to the City Council. So Pacham started in 2004 as a partnership between the faith community and emergency responders who wanted to reduce or eliminate the deaths of our unhoused neighbors due to hypothermia. And since 2004, we've been offering winter emergency shelter for adults as a low barrier model. Again, like the Haven was talking about, that means we're not breathalyzing, we're not drug testing, we're not background checking. If you are in need of a place to stay, we are happy to serve you as our guest. We've also developed in the more recent years some specific housing programs for seniors and for women as two kind of specialty populations among all of our guests, and we provide one-time housing and up to a year of case management to help them stabilize in housing. To do all of this work, we mobilize more than 80 faith congregations and secular organizations, as well as other volunteers, and we do our work in partnership with the broad array of service organizations here in the community. In our 20 years of service, we've helped almost 2,000 unique individuals in need, and about 500 of them have exited our shelter directly to permanent housing. It is, again, like a drop in the bucket, but this is our part, and we're very proud to have served all of these neighbors in need. So I wanted to get into some data, and our core mission, again, is our congregate shelter, our winter emergency shelter. So here you can see both the unique guests served in a season and the bed nights for each season since we opened in 2004. One of the things that I want to highlight here is that pre-pandemic, we were really serving a little over 200 unique individuals per season for roughly a 24-week winter season. That changed, of course, during the pandemic. You can see the dip here on the graph, but that's because we were operating year-round hotel-based shelters. So we were first doing hotel-based sheltering at the La Quinta, and from May 2021 through June 2023, we were operating Premier Circle. And those radically shift the numbers, so I wanted to just pull out our congregate shelter service here. Something that was surprising for us is that this year we were working with a base capacity of 2 different shelter sites, one for 35 men and one for 15 women, which is less than what we were doing pre-pandemic, but we learned a few lessons about keeping our social distance from each other. And we still served 18% more than our last peak. We served 294 unique individuals this season. That's huge. I think that kind of reflects what Shayla and Misty and Anna have been saying about the increase in need. And there's a lot to pick apart there. But we're very grateful again for the response of our community to help us meet that need and provide shelter on a nightly basis for 25 weeks. And here's where I think it gets interesting for the City Council. One of the questions that we ask at our intake when someone first comes in seeking shelter is, where was your last stable residence? And what I've provided here is the percentage of individuals coming to us per season from the City of Charlottesville, Albemarle County, our other catchment counties, Virginia, but not the catchment. So that's places like Richmond and Waynesboro and Buckingham, and then outside of Virginia. And what you can see is we really do serve our local neighbors. Especially this year, we had about 73% of our clients come from our catchment, which is good. Drawing out this season's data specifically, you can see we had 73% of our guests, our clients, come to us from our catchment area, and of those, about 65% had their last permanent residence in the City of Charlottesville, and 19% in Albemarle County. And we also note that there continues to be an increase in the number of individuals we're serving from the outer counties, in particular Louisa and Fluvanna. But you can see that most of our clients are here day to day. Some other interesting changes, maybe less fun to talk about, is that our clients are coming to us with greater needs and fewer resources. We talked a little bit about how the housing market is strained, but one of the reasons that we perhaps have seen such an increase this year in the need for homeless services and prevention services is that the social supports that came with the pandemic, what I like to call the silver lining of the pandemic, they went away on June 30th, 2023. So what we're seeing is not just a natural aging of our population, and with that, the all of the physical health issues and challenges of just being in crisis and in trauma for so long, and how that bears out in the body. But we're seeing people come in with fewer opportunities to get out successfully. The one that stands out for me, because I do SOAR claims, is only about 15% of our clients this year had a disability income, compared to around a third pre-pandemic.
What does SOAR mean?
SOAR, I think I have it memorized now. SSI, SSDI, Outreach, Access, and Recovery. It is a process for helping someone apply for disability benefits that they are entitled to.
Thank you.
So even with the reduction in resources that we have, we're still very proud of the work that we're doing to support our individuals coming to us, to support our guests. 70% of them came to us directly from the street, but only 35 left to the street. And the most important thing is that 24 guests left directly from our shelter into permanent supportive housing. And what I would like to highlight in that is only 6 of those 24 had an ongoing subsidy. And all of those 6, they were all permanent supportive housing vouchers or housing choice vouchers. That means that someone without income who has significant mental and physical health challenges is coming into our shelter, doesn't really have a chance of leaving, but somehow we make the miracle happen. And it's through the partnerships that we have in our community that we can make that happen. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
You reference institution. What
Yes,
does that mean?
thank you. So institution in that regard is kind of a category for hospitals, mental health facilities, and jail. And I appreciate you pointing that out, because that is a fairly high number of individuals coming to us directly from institutions, but it's also a lot leaving us to institutions. And it's another indicator, for me at least, of the acuity of folks' needs, is that they need a physical health care, mental health care facility. That's where they're going to. They're not leaving us to jail.
I wanted them to hear that. Okay.
Thanks.
Good afternoon. I'm Sandy Cherico, and I'm representing the Salvation Army. I'm the Director of Social Services at the Salvation Army. I'm an occupational therapist by trade, and I've spent my career in the rehab world. I came to the Salvation Army in December of 2023, and I absolutely love my job and what we do at the Salvation Army. In the next few minutes, I'll be sharing some of the wonderful things that we do and have been doing at the Salvation Army. The motto of the Salvation Army is to doing the most good, and we really try to live those words daily. We offer a high barrier shelter to both men and women, and when I left this afternoon, we were full on the men's side of 28 and with a waiting list, and 21 in the women's side. And for those of you who know Brenda Smith, she's been at the shelter manager for years and years, and she's never seen 21 women, that many women in our shelter. So the numbers are growing exponentially every day. We also offer breakfast and dinner to the general public. We serve our residents breakfast, lunch, and dinner daily. We have a small food pantry that has fresh produce, fresh breads, along with the typical items in a food pantry, and it's donations of what we can get. So you just never know what you might find in our food pantry. The Energy Assistance Program is run out of my department, the Social Services Department. And this past warming season, we assisted with $298,000 for heating assistance, and we could have offered more had we had the funds. When I started at the Salvation Army, we decided that the public could really utilize a hygiene closet. So I campaigned, and many churches and organizations came forward to stock our closet. and we currently serve about 20 families per week. Everything from shampoo and conditioner to diapers, depends. And toilet tissue, and they leave asking when they'll be able to come back again to get those items that we probably look at as just typical items in our closet that they look at as luxuries. Let's see here. Another positive that has happened this last year is Corporate Place the Van Meters in Charlottesville. They have been tasked with building a strong team to support the capital campaign for the new facility of Hope Has a Place. It is our hope that the needs of the increased homelessness and even more marginalized, and I see tons of those in the social services department. These folks are a half a paycheck away from being on the streets. So it is our hope that the needs of the increased homelessness and even more marginalized people in the city of Charlottesville will be met with the vision of our new facility when it comes to fruition. We want to provide transformative opportunities necessary for our neighbors to not only survive, but to thrive. Our social services department is growing. My position was added. I oversee currently the shelter, the feeding program, the social services department, and just about anything else on any given day. But I was hired to lead the team, and I'm adding staff to assist with our growing needs. Last year, the Corps assisted 4,677 people. That number has increased over a third just in this past year. Our soup kitchen last year served 49,265 meals. This number is rising as well. There's more and more families that are coming to our campuses for meals. There were just a couple families at lunch today when I left. This is something that was seldom seen in the past. Our shelter provided 18,278 nights of lodging, and this number does not include the folks that spent the night in our warm rooms just to get out of the cold. We were blessed with 6,829 volunteer hours this past year, with 1,515 volunteers. Without the volunteers, the Salvation Army would never stay afloat. The Salvation Army shines during the holiday season. We're busy all year round, but we really do shine during the holiday season. Last year, we served 265 full Thanksgiving dinners to the public. Barbara Bellamy, who has cooked for our kitchen for 30 years, with Thanksgiving being one of her bright spots. It's so much so that the celebration has been named the Barbara Bellamy Thanksgiving Feast. She's a devoted employee who believes in and lives the mission of the Salvation Army every day. Christmas is another big project for the Salvation Army. Last year, we provided all new gifts for 840 kids comprised in 350 families. I started with the Salvation Army on December 11th and was thrown into the mix of the Christmas rush. I have to say it was one of the most inspiring and overwhelming projects that I've ever been involved in. Every child received a bike or a hoverboard or an Xbox and garbage bags of brand new toys. We really made every effort to make sure that the children and the parents got every item that was requested on their Christmas list. As we move into the next year, we will continue with all of our current projects, along with setting our sights on our new facility. Hope Has a Place. Our new facility will house 114 people, where we currently only have the capacity for 52 folks. Our community dining room and soup kitchen will seat 120 people. That's 70 more than we can currently accommodate in our dining room. We will have 28 beds in our transitional housing, and in this case, transitional for us means families. So we'll have 28 beds in the transitional housing, 7 units with 2 beds in each unit. Currently, the transitional housing at the Salvation Army is closed down. We'll also have large multi-purpose rooms and 8 life skills classrooms. It's a very exciting time for the Salvation Army. We've served the Charlottesville area since 1912. We've been in our current location since the 1960s. Our building is old, antiquated, full of roaches, and does not meet ADA code. I would like to close with saying thank you again for your time. Thank you for allowing me to speak. But I would also like to let you know that it is your opportunity to make a difference and help us show those that need it the most that hope has a place.
Thank you very much.
Do you guys have any questions?
I may have missed something. What is the expected timeline for the project, the construction project?
Would you like to write a check? We can make it go a lot quicker. We're in the silent phase of the capital campaign, moving into the public phase in October, but we're hoping that this time next year that the building is imploded and we have moved into our store on Cherry Avenue with our offices and shelter, and it'll take probably 18 months for the building to go up.
So October 25-ish would be the beginning of the destruction of the site that's there, and meanwhile, folks will have moved on to Cherry Avenue on a temporary basis.
Well, hopefully it'll be before October, but yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
And then you're thinking 18 months from the date of the initial implosion
Yes.
to the date of opening?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I actually managed to do it. It's a miracle. My name is Sarah Ellis. I am representing the Shelter for Help in Emergency. I'm the fundraising and development coordinator there at the shelter. And I imagine that you all know the shelter. We've been around for 45 years now. We opened in 1979, and we serve victims of domestic violence, women and children in our... I'm not doing something now. Oh, sorry. So women and children in our emergency residential facility. We also provide services to men who are victims of domestic violence in alternative accommodations. We provide a comprehensive trauma-informed services to adults and children victims of domestic intimate partner violence, and we serve the Thomas Jefferson area, so the city and the surrounding counties of Albemarle, Fluvanna Green, Louisa, and Nelson. Sorry, keep losing control of my thing here. We differ perhaps from Patcham and the Haven and the Salvation Army in that we have a specific group of people we serve, as I say, with people who've experienced domestic violence. We offer a full 24-hour service in our residential facility. Our facility has a 25-bed capacity, but we are open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So our residents can stay within the premises all the time that they're with us. They can stay up to 6 weeks in total, and they're there on a crisis emergency basis in order to deal with hope and healing and moving forward with their life and moving hopefully to a future that is violence-free. We have a 24-hour crisis hotline, which is staffed at the residential facility by staff and volunteers. And our clients have some different needs to perhaps the general homeless population, in that although they are seeking housing, they also have significant safety concerns. They need to be safe from their abuser, and at the same time, service is in a confidential location. The residential is at a confidential address in order to secure their safety. We do more than shelter. We offer all of our services to non-residential clients as well. So our residential clients and our non-residential will all receive the opportunity to get counseling support and legal advocacy. We offer Spanish language outreach and services. We offer prevention services, many of those going into all of our local schools in the city and in the counties, and support services for children and teens. Since 1979, we've provided shelter residential services to 10,472 adults and children. So each year we answer in the region of about 2,000 hotline calls and provide 5,000 nights of safety to more than 400 adults and children seeking our services. Those numbers refer to the total jurisdiction that we serve. The emergency residential serves around 200 adults and children each year. Charlottesville residents typically make up about 36% of these clients, so something like 70 to 80 of those residents are Charlottesville residents who are in our residential facility. Charlottesville residents are the largest percentage of clients that we're serving. So Albemarle comes next, obviously, as a large county, and then our outlying counties make up the remainder. Average length of stay is 23 nights. And these statistics have been fairly consistent for over the years, but it is true to say that domestic violence is a grossly underreported crime situation and issue, and there are many, many, many people out there who are experiencing varying degrees of abuse and violence in their home who are not seeking services. Without adequate housing options, victims are more likely to return to their abusive, dangerous situations. And we truthfully have very few of our exiting clients who find city rental options because of the cost of housing in the city. It becomes really a challenge to be able to get people into rental housing in our area. So obviously what we're looking for, I think, is what everybody else is looking for, which is more affordable housing. But I think in particular, transitional housing is really important to us. And you asked earlier, what is transitional housing? For us, it is being able to offer something on a slightly longer term than we currently offer our emergency residential folks. So families who might need something like up to 2 years in order to get themselves stable and settled, and with an income that can support a more permanent housing option. At the moment, we only have 1 unit of transitional housing, so it's extremely limited. And I think both our organization and many of the ones we work with would benefit greatly from having more of those options throughout the city. We certainly see people rotating in and out throughout our program. They can leave, go back to their abuser, and be back to us again. We do see people coming back again. We see people moving out of the area because they can't afford to be here. They try to find all kinds of options in order to move to a safe place, and we do everything we can to support them in that process. Transitional housing would help us a great deal. We would continue to support our clients if they were in transitional housing and wishing to have support services. Our case managers could offer them ongoing support and advocacy. Thank you. Questions?
Can I ask a quick question?
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at your website. So if a person were to call your confidential hotline, what happens? Do you end up involving the police, or just depending on the situation, I guess?
It does, and we would if they requested that, absolutely. Really, our services are entirely driven by our clients. whatever it is they need in order for themselves. And while many of the issues are similar across individuals and families, every family has a different set of needs, different permutations in what it is they need. So it's really answering the phone. We're finding out what it is they need. Sometimes it's just information. Sometimes it's needing to hear a supportive voice out there. Usually we will talk with people about safety planning, how to either leave where they are or stay where they are with safety. Leaving can and is the most dangerous point of time generally for domestic violence victims, so we're very careful to help them with planning what they need to do to get out as safely as possible. And if shelter is what they're needing, then that's where we work with them to get them into our facility.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. I'm also going to be speaking on behalf of Region 10's PATH program. PATH stands for Projects for Assistance in Transition from Homelessness. Ms. Cindy Richardson was originally on the agenda, but she is taking a well-deserved day off today. So these will be brief, though. Region 10's PATH program provides outreach and assistance to adults with serious mental illness who are experiencing homelessness or who are at risk of experiencing homelessness. We currently have 2 part-time PATH outreach workers for our community. The services they provide include community-based outreach, mental health connection and support, substance abuse support, and case management, and they served 125 clients over the course of 1 year. If there's any questions about PATH, I'm happy to try to answer them or pass them on to the appropriate people. All right, so next, also we have the Charlottesville City Schools. They were not able to be present today, but they do have a McKinney-Vento program at the Charlottesville City Schools that help homeless children.
Is McKinney-Vento a term of art? Is that?
Oh, sorry. The McKinney-Vento is an act. I don't know much about it in terms of how to describe it, but the McKinney-Vento Act helps families who have children who are in the school system and are either unhoused or bouncing around from house to house. So the HUD definition doesn't necessarily apply to McKinney-Vento families because you can also be unstably housed, meaning you're kind of couch surfing from home to home. But that is considered unstable and McKinney-Vento homeless.
So it's a federal statute?
It is, yes.
Can you explain a little bit more about the difference between HUD's definition of homelessness and the McKinney-Vento definition of homelessness?
Sure. Yeah, the HUD definition of homelessness means you're either staying in a shelter or any place not meant for human habitation. So you could be sleeping outside or in your car, outdoors in a tent. McKinney-Vento homeless, you can have any of those criteria apply to you as well, but you could also be unstably housed, meaning you don't have a permanent roof over your head. So you could be staying, with a friend or family member for 1 week and then bouncing to a different household the next week. You might be sleeping in your car sometimes, but you could also be just bouncing around between different households.
So the school system sort of captures a broader number of homelessness in our area than the HUD number does.
Yes, correct.
And that affects how we apply for grants and
Exactly.
and what counts.
It does, yes. So these are some of the things that they consider when they're talking to students who are unstably housed. Can that student go to the same place every night to sleep in a safe and sufficient space? So they make sure children are meeting these criteria in order to determine if more assistance is needed. So the Families in Crisis program serves Albemarle County students, and then we have the Charlottesville City Schools that are also doing something similar. Currently, we don't have any solutions in terms of emergency shelter for students who are unstably housed, but they do track those numbers. So here's a list of the numbers of students that were identified. I believe there was some kind of shift post-pandemic, so that number did increase in the 2022-2023 school year. For the 23-24 school year, they served 136 students, or identified 136 students who needed some kind of housing supports. So some of the barriers that can happen as a result of being unstably housed is there's a lack of documentation. You're moving around from place to place. You're losing important documents like maybe your social security card, your birth certificate, even assignments for school. There's fewer resources for school supplies or fees. Lack of transportation to and from school, loss of credits when you're transferring to different schools, lots of instructional gaps, less developed connections due to constantly changing around to different schools, a lack of technology or internet access, and an inadequate space, support, or other resources to complete your learning. So they are seeing students who aren't, attending school because they're unstably housed, and that's the most important focus for the family. So they put this quote in: the child's classroom may be the only place where the child can experience quiet, interact with children his or her own age, and experience success. School is the most normal activity that most children experience collectively. For homeless children, it is much more than a learning environment. It is a place of safety, personal space, friendships, and support. So Charlottesville City Schools are saying, what can we do? We find them, we enroll them, and we keep them in school to help them succeed. They identify students by tracking attendance at all the different schools in the city school system. If there's frequent unexplained absences or tardies, they're also keeping track of that. If someone has a lack of basic school supplies, they're also making note of that and making sure they have what they need to be successful in the classroom. If they're seeing students who have chronic hunger or fatigue, that's also something they keep an eye out for, as well as inconsistent hygiene, poor health or nutrition, failure to complete homework or projects, or the inability to pay for fees. So all of these things are characteristics they look for in the student population within the city schools to make sure that they're being connected to the supportive services they need. So they're, I'm trying to identify students who are meeting those criteria, making sure they're immediately enrolled in whatever local school that is closest to them in their jurisdiction, and they try to maintain that student's enrollment in the school of origin that meets that student's best interest. So they're trying to help provide transportation to make sure that's consistent, there's no lack in that. And sometimes they might have to cross school division lines, but they work really closely with the Albemarle County public school system just to keep them enrolled and make sure they're still learning despite whatever might be going on in terms of their housing situation. So with the school supports that they provide, they're giving free school meals, Title I services, other school programs, just ensuring that they're set up for success in all the ways: academic, behavioral, mental health, engagement, and just making sure that families are referred to the resources they need. And connecting with the McKinney-Vento liaison. So Patrick and Jody are co-liaisons for the Charlottesville City School System, and they ensure that all the students that they're coming in contact with who are unstably housed or experiencing homelessness have the resources in place to keep them not only stable within their home environment, but also attending school and making sure that those academics are met and achieved as well. Any questions? All right, thank you. And I just want to give a quick shout out to the organizations that are providing cooling centers for folks who are either medically vulnerable or unhoused. That's really important as the temperatures go into the 90s and near 100. So thank you all for setting up those cooling centers and spreading the word about that as well.
Can we ask questions sort of you for the group? Is that okay?
Yeah, and if I don't know how to answer, I will call in my colleagues.
Yeah, thank you for all the work that you do and that all of you do. It's really impressive and important. So I've had a couple of, now that I'm on city council, people will call me and say, oh, you should be able to hook this person up with some housing or whatever. And I try, but I'm not very good at it. A couple of times I've actually had a person, I'm thinking of one right now, that actually has a voucher, an HCV, is that what it's called?
Housing choice voucher.
And I see you in the back there, sir, Mr. Harrow, and we spoke, and I guess you're with the county now, about this individual that had this housing choice voucher. Is there I realize that's just like the first step in the door. There are lots of housing choice vouchers, but still not enough people that take them. Is that the Is that?
I can't really speak to that, so
Okay.
Anthony, if you'd like to chime in, you're
Oh,
welcome
sorry.
to. Yeah.
Maybe I'm asking the
Okay, and
wrong
Liz,
group.
Liz
I'm
as
sorry.
well, yeah.
That mic works too.
Both microphones work.
Either one.
Hello, Anthony. How are you,
Hello,
sir?
I'm Anthony Haro. I'm the Housing Program Manager for Albany County. But yes, our Housing Choice Voucher Program participants, voucher holders do face challenges in trying to attach their voucher or access housing because of the lack of affordable housing. There are HUD regulations that limit the price of the rentals that we can allow voucher holders to access. That's one thing. But another big challenge that I know a lot of voucher holders face is also particular requirements to access the housing, like eviction history, credit score, criminal background. Those all can be barriers as well, just to accessing housing normally. So, yes.
So when we spoke, I was surprised there wasn't like a single clearinghouse or something that could sort of be a matchmaker with, and it must be very complicated. It must be the reason between if a person has, I'm thinking of several people that I've spoken to, they have a housing choice voucher, they've got a certain, one person had great history, another person was kind of iffy. That there could be like a portal or whatever you want to call it, where you could go meet with someone and they could help you find, help do the research for you in terms of the various groups that would take vouchers. That must be, I must be oversimplifying things. Because I spoke with Sunshine Mathon about at PHA, and he said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. Well, there is the Housing Navigation Hub at the Financial Opportunity Center, which aims to do something similar to that.
And is that with PHA?
That's correct.
Okay.
So I did develop a kind of a master list of housing before the pandemic, and then
Wow.
the pandemic changed everything.
Uh-huh.
We worked with a number of other organizations in town to try to keep that updated. I had the kind of ugly version of things. I had the data, but not like a nice interface. But recently there was someone who's trying to pick that project back up. But the other thing to note from that work is that Virginia is the 11th worst state in accessible, affordable housing. So of 100 folks who are low income or extremely low income, there's only 30 units available.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So we can try to find housing. There just simply isn't enough of it to go around.
Got it.
Yeah.
What would the national average or something be? I mean,
I
say
don't-
we're 38th or whatever.
I can't remember, but I feel like there was, who was it that put out that study? I'd have to look it up.
Are we way worse than
No,
average?
I'd have to
Are
look
we,
it up. We're the 11th worst of all the states.
And
So that's very low. I think worse states are still just in the 20s, so we're not that far behind them.
Mm-hmm.
And is there a correlation with, I know you're thinking about this study kind of off the top of your head, you don't have it in front of you, so I don't want to kind of pin you down too much on it. But I'm assuming there's probably some kind of correlation, and correct me if I'm wrong, between just the sheer number of housing that is available regardless of whether or not it's dedicated affordable housing and the number of homeless people that...
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Okay, sorry. So I'm trying to say, like, in places that have abundant housing, no matter the cost of it, I'm wondering if there is a correlation between that helping reduce the number of people who are experiencing homelessness.
I think in the grand scheme of things, Charlottesville has a lot of challenges, certainly, and I don't want to minimize them, but to compare to a larger city, we are roughly able to shelter all of the individuals in our community who are experiencing homelessness on a given night, whereas other communities are having our total number, unsheltered on a given night. So it's it's hard to kind of place us in like these broad strokes. I think that our solution, like we've several folks have talked about, is transitional housing to kind of mind the gap between needing shelter services and the challenges of finding affordable housing. But it's complicated, so.
But it would be safe to assume a unit that someone's able to get paired with who has a voucher it wouldn't be market rate housing that the market recently constructed. It would be housing that was subsidized, part of an affordable housing project. Whatever its benefits, the new market rate housing just is incapable of meeting that specific need.
Yeah, so what I saw when I was working on the kind of housing master list project was from 2006 till roughly 2020, when I stopped working on the project. What our community saw was an extreme loss of small landlords, landlords who had like a few units, 1 to 4, and the transfer of those units from individual landlords, your neighborhood landlord, to property management companies. And that's when we really saw the increase in barriers to housing through things like your income relative to the rent. Credit score is a huge one. The big one for me is these are sex offenders, and property management companies are not going to go for that. Yeah. So
I know that just brings to mind the Belmont apartments, where some people were renting those for $400 a month who had been there for decades, and a new landlord did a quick renovation, tripled the rents.
Yeah.
All that's gone.
Exactly.
One final follow-up, is when you have, I think it's a striking number that of those leaving into permanent supportive housing, only 6 had a voucher. Are you finding that the limitation, how much of the limitation is that someone can get a voucher and can't find a place to live versus, for whatever reason, people coming through your programs can't get a voucher?
They can't get a voucher. That's really the big thing. One of the huge advantages of Premier Circle is that at the end, when we were closing, the communities rallied and provided dedicated subsidies for our clients, and we were able to successfully move on at the end 50% of all of the individuals. And again, we're a low barrier shelter, so we were serving sex offenders, violent felons, etc. We don't have that in our regular winter shelter operation. So our folks have to compete with everybody in long waiting lines for very limited rapid rehousing exits. And while Region 10 manages hundreds of permanent supportive housing vouchers, they're all claimed at this point, so I think there's some new ones coming in, but I can't speak to that. So.
Yeah, and I don't know what the answer is, but it calls to mind how important it would be, if there is a way to do it, to have the housing authority better systemize and connect voucher opportunities for some of our service providers in the homeless space. But
we've also found a lot of success given that we don't exit folks a lot of the time with a housing subsidy. The case management to stabilize is really important to landlord engagement, retaining landlords as folks who will rent to our clients, but also to ensure that the client will be able to make that huge mental, psychological leap from crisis mode to stability again. And I think that's another argument for just ongoing case management for folks in housing.
But I do have questions for you all. Sorry, I can't sit down just yet. But before I get there, I've got a question for our city manager. Do we have a homelessness liaison position? Is that something that's been on the books ever, or something that we have created and isn't filled, or would that be a new thing, or what's the status of city staff?
So we don't have a specific homeless liaison position, right?
Correct.
But we do have, I can't think of the title.
Under Mr. Rogers' tenure, he had added space in the office of what is now social equity for someone to potentially focus in on homeless services, but it was undefined. With that time, we were still continuing to explore how best to support our existing service providers and not duplicate efforts. That position remains funded but unfilled at this point because it is key that we, as the city, whatever we do makes sense with our service providers and doesn't usurp the work that they're already doing and have years of experience doing, as well as doesn't duplicate efforts. And as you can hear, we have a very broad, actually, amount of services that are occurring already.
And so is that definition being worked on currently to try and kind of shape that role, or is that on the back burner? Or
It's
where
under
is
consideration, and today is a part of what
that?
comes
Is
next.
a part of that?
Yes.
Okay. And so I'm assuming when we try and hone in on that, we'll have a lot of these folks at
Yes.
the table.
Well, I don't know that we need them at the table as much as we may do something else with that money maybe, based on what we're hearing today. Because we don't know that we need that position.
Okay, because
They
what
may
I've
need the
heard, yeah,
position.
what I've heard today is we don't have enough, in our community, there's not enough outreach happening. So like you said, when people were in Premier Circle, it was easier to capture accurate data.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we don't have enough street outreach, we're missing data.
Right.
Which, affects all of the work that you all do, in addition to probably what we need to recognize about funding affordable housing, allowing market rate housing, et cetera.
Right.
And then also, from what Brian was saying about kind of having a more robust list of people who are able to offer voucher space to use the vouchers, some kind of like landlord engagement position, which I don't know if that would fall under the same.
Well, that's the question. I
Right.
think that's the point, yes.
So, and then hang on, I had another note from something Lloyd said earlier.
Could I ask can I interject?
Yes.
Is your concern, Mr. City Manager, or your thought is how not to duplicate effort and what sort of makes the most sense in terms of work that the nonprofit sector is doing versus the public sector? And
Yes.
trying to- I see.
Well, and really, to be perfectly honest, to not have a knee-jerk reaction and just simply create a position because we want to create a position to do something. What are we creating the position to do?
Sure.
So that position today has been sitting unfilled because we're still trying to figure that out. And again, part of today's conversation was so that you would be able to engage in more of this information so that we can bring back what our next steps can be. And I'll go ahead and tell you, I have a number of questions that I too want to ask. So we'll
Okay.
get through that.
Okay, so there are needs, whether or not it comes from the
We're trying to
city
make-
or
we're gonna make that
perhaps
decision, yes.
contributions
Correct.
to the existing organizations.
And the reality is, just so that you know, the position has been created, therefore it's recurring funding. That's a good thing. It's already baked in, so that means we can spend it every year, whether it's us spending it or possibly some of the individuals in
Or
this room.
reallocating it.
Yes.
Okay. Right now, what does it look like? Because we heard from all of you individually. What is your communication like amongst each other? And how does that feel for a person who comes to you as, where's the first step and what do they do next? What does that process look like?
Yeah, so we have regular recurring meetings between the service providers. One I can think of off the top of mind is the Service Provider Council. We have that once a month where the direct service homeless providers come together and talk about, right now we're working on our community plan to end homelessness, which is alongside BRAC's strategic plan to end homelessness. But I also want to get some lived experience perspective in there, so that's why I'm creating the Lived Experience Advisory Council. But we do stay in regular communication with each other about services, and a lot of our shared clients are touching down on a lot of our organizations for help and support. Generally, when someone is experiencing homelessness or about to become unhoused, we direct them to the homeless information line, which is our coordinated entry phone line. That's their first point of contact into the system, unless they're going through PATH for outreach or going to a shelter directly. We try to streamline the services through that phone line so they can be screened for an appointment with the Haven, who manages the coordinated entry system and has homeless services funding for rapid rehousing, homelessness prevention, and they also have a private housing fund.
Okay, and so for a client who their first step is calling the hotline at the Haven, what is the process, hopefully, to get them to rapid rehousing, and how long does that usually take?
Usually they're screened within 48 hours. They're given a call back within 48 hours and given an appointment generally the same week. Rapid rehousing is a different story. Again, as Anna mentioned, they can only house about 15 or so people a year through the rapid rehousing program. That's why they created that private housing fund, the Laura DeLapp Haven Housing Fund. It's meant to be a fast-tracked way to help people who have income but are unhoused. So they just need a quick shot of funding, really just a security deposit or first month's rent. And if they can sustain that and support themselves, after that initial funding, then that would be the best step for them. Rapid rehousing, it's tough to get into, honestly, because there's not a lot of spots available. But that program can provide up to 2 years of case management, rental support, and lots of service connection.
If someone is able to go through the rapid rehousing process and then the funding support stops, they're able to maintain it, do they still have access to case management without having to start the system over again?
They're formally exited from the program if they are hitting their recertification every 90 days and they're making too much income for the program. So if they're more than 30% AMI at the time of recertification, then they're exited. And the case management would stop as well, formally. But I think, if they have a good relationship with their case manager, they're welcome to check in for quick little questions here and there. But the formal case management does stop.
Okay, and how are clients prioritized? How is it, or what makes someone more eligible for certain help than another?
So we have a community case review every first and third Wednesday of the month. That's where service providers get together and discuss chronically homeless folks. So that's who we prioritize for rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing through Region 10. Usually the chronically homeless folks are defined as having some kind of disabling condition, so a mental illness or physical ailment, and they've been homeless for a certain period of time. That would define them as chronic. So we look at that list. It's usually about 40 or so clients every time at any given time. And we go through the list and we decide as a group of service providers who we would like to prioritize for the next available spots for rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing.
Ms. Washington? Yes. Would you mind adding in for council the purpose of that by name list and kind of the information that helps us also to determine outside of those who are chronically homeless?
Yes, and so Ashley touched on the by name list. So that's the list of everyone we know to be experiencing homelessness. It's a very defined list. It has, the age and race, length of time homeless, how many times they've been homeless in a 3-year period, what their disabling conditions are. And so we look at all of that at these community case review meetings to determine who should be prioritized for housing first. We would love to house everyone, but unfortunately the funding's just not there.
What is the constraint? You said that rapid rehousing can only take 15 people a year or something?
I missed the first part of your question, sorry.
You said that rapid rehousing can only take about 15
Yes.
people a year. What is the constraint there?
Just not enough funding to support. Usually when people are on rapid rehousing, they typically use the full 2 years, and so we're trying to budget for paying their rent for a full 2 years, along with case management supports.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
You had brought up communication amongst the providers. It might be helpful to touch on HMIS and how
Yes.
this is a shared.
Yeah, so HMI, thank you, Ms. Steve. HMIS is our homeless management information system. We have about 70 users in that system. It's a shared database where we keep our by name list as well as client information. We can lock it down to certain agencies, but generally once a client signs a release of information form coming through Salvation Army, Pacham, the Haven, any number of these shelters, they are giving permission for other shelters and agencies to access their information. And so that's how we share info across agencies as well.
Great. And what would you say are we've talked about coordinating between the agencies, we've talked about the need for outreach positions. What are some of the other gaps that stand out to you all?
I think I've touched on all the needs. I think outreach is a big one. We're seeing a lot more focus on the downtown mall and the urban ring of Albemarle. I think our pit count numbers probably could have been higher if we'd had better outreach and kind of knew where the encampments are. So my hope is to fund an outreach position. I'm applying for funding right now through that, through a private fund. But more outreach, I think more transitional housing, as a number of folks have touched on, just to provide that kind of gap between emergency shelter and permanent housing, having that case management support before people are just kind of thrown into permanent housing without that piece would be really helpful. And more permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing slots. Really filling all the buckets in our continuum of care, I think, because all of them are important.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Question for you. You know, the city has purchased this a piece of land at Avon and Levy to
Yes.
hopefully build something there. Not hopefully, we will. There was a lot of, I don't know a lot, but definitely there were people that had some anxiety about the fact that that was going to be, quote, a homeless shelter. I hope that that is one component of what we end up doing. I hope there are other components as well, like a community center and a whole range of things that we could do there. It'd be really, really neat. Do you have any sort of, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but do you have any, like, and maybe this is an invitation for you to talk some more with Mr. Sanders and Ms. Marshall later, but just any thoughts about what we're wanting to do there? I think it would be like a low barrier shelter, overnight type shelter. Any feedback for us at this point?
Yeah, I think.
If that feels too laden, just say, I'll get back to you.
Yeah, I've definitely got an answer. I think more low barrier shelter is definitely important. I don't think Liz touched on this specifically, but Pacham was hitting their maximum, numbers every night this past season, or most nights this past season. And so, yeah. She said, yeah. So Pacham was hitting, capacity every night for their men, and I think low barrier shelter, especially for men, we could definitely use more of that. I think more transitional housing units, even if it's just a handful, would be better than, what we currently have now in stock. I think it could be definitely a mixed use type of building, but more affordable housing, of course. And we need that everywhere. Even if it doesn't happen at that particular site, somewhere would be great. And it would be a much needed improvement.
You mentioned low barrier. Sandy, I don't think you mentioned this when you were describing the new shelter for the Salvation Army, but what will the barriers be like there? Oh, and sorry, for people at home, the microphone has to be spoken into, sorry. Just, they can't hear on the Zoom otherwise.
The new shelter will be high barrier. We are in talks with some of city and private, I think, individual groups for opening a low barrier shelter as well, where we're hoping to move our offices and such on Cherry Avenue. That would become a low barrier shelter. And so then we would have high barrier where folks can be, they can be with other people who want to get on a path of getting out of homelessness, becoming employed. And I haven't been in, this arena for a very long time, but one thing that I do see as a problem is just the rate of pay. The salaries just don't support even the cheapest of housing in the Charlottesville area. So I don't know where we're going to go with that, but that's a big problem too. But we have lowered the standards with the Salvation Army. It used to be 0 tolerance, and now it's DMV. I think it's 0.06. Is that correct for? I saw a policeman. Is it?
0.08 for.
0.08. Okay, that's what ours is now.
0.05, other things start to happen. 0.08.
Okay.
I give you the longer explanation.
You know quite a bit about this.
45 years.
So it's kind of coming up to the end here. Michael, or do you have any other questions to pose, or anyone else?
I do, but I'll let you go finish.
No, or you can go ahead, Lloyd.
You know, probably the question that I get asked the most is sort of, what am I personally going to do to clean up the mall? And I want to sort of turn that question around a little bit to ask, we know that there are probably, I don't know, I'm guessing probably 15 people who are sleeping on the sidewalk, on the mall, very visibly. I'm sure there are many more less visibly so. Are there like 2 or 3 things in particular that we should be thinking we're going to try to do at the city level to address that particular problem of the folks just flat out sleeping on the mall?
I will
Sleeping in
say
doorways.
outreach takes time. Building relationships with folks takes time, especially if, they've worked with a number of agencies and maybe have been assuming that they'd get promised certain things and it doesn't work out for whatever reason. So that relationship building could take, several months. So I don't think cleaning up the downtown mall will with, people who are unhoused will necessarily happen overnight. All we can do is have that presence and just show people that we're trying to help folks who are unhoused and sleeping in the mall get to something more permanent, but it is going to take time. I don't think there's one quick resolution that we could offer at this point.
Are there a few things in particular that the city should be trying to do, whether it's an organizational, logistical effort on the part of the various nonprofits, or things that the city can do to facilitate some of that?
Ooh, I'm going to call on my colleagues here if you have any suggestions.
Or is that a to be determined?
For me, it's a to be determined, I think. I would have to think on that one.
Because I haven't had a good answer when the people ask me the question, so.
I'm not sure there is.
You can't move people off the street if they don't have somewhere to go.
That's right.
So this discussion about having a low barrier shelter is a good start.
Okay.
I'll just chime in briefly. I cannot answer your question directly, but when we were at Premier Circle, just being there and doing the work in the way that we do almost eliminated the calls for emergency services for the police. We had to address physical health still, physical health calls, but I think that's some good data. It went from 20 or 30 calls a month to less than 5.
And I think, I know we're close to 5:30, but I think we'll be okay to go.
Yeah, go ahead.
A little bit
Yeah,
over.
just a little bit.
But I don't have any more questions. I just was looking through just to make it concrete. And you said the housing need, you encounter a lot of people even at 50% of area median income. And as you referenced, HUD, that's about a little over $30,000 a year for a household of one, which would be someone working $15 an hour full time. And just looking it up, the rent would have to be about $700 or lower for them to be able to afford that. And then, of course, there are many people, 50% is high for the income they could have. There could be people at 0 to 30% AMI where the rent they need could be $200-300, maybe less a month. So it just hit home for me that this is something that capitalism and the market just are never going to solve. This is going to require social housing. It's going to require government investment at a local and state level, which is nothing new, but to me it hits home that it's not new, but to me the biggest limiting factor seems to be how do we figure out what the transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, and low barrier shelters we want to build, get that on paper, and then make it a budget line item. And to me, that's hard and not easy, but I feel like until we do that, we'll have the same presentation every single year because the limiting factor is that, and it won't change until those investments get made. So that's just my reaction, but.
And I will say anecdotally, several years ago, rooming houses owned by private landlords were maybe $500, $550 a month. Now they're at least $700 a month. And if someone's on disability or SSI and it's a fixed income, that's their whole paycheck, basically. So it's really hard.
Mr. Sanders?
Quick fire set of questions.
Okay.
You probably won't be able to do all these yourself. The homeless outreach position, is it one position that you need, or is it more than one position? And
I
you're
would
only
love
seeking one?
More than one. I'm currently applying for funding for one. But if I could have a team of 2 or more, that would be great.
And you already got to the point of what I was also going to ask as a follow-up is, what happens as a result of having those 2 individuals? What's your perspective on that? I think you started, but is there anything else you would say as to having 2 homeless outreach workers available to you will help you do what over what period of time?
Eventually move our chronic numbers downward, chronic and veteran homeless numbers, which are subpopulations that we're working on, and eventually shift those people into permanent housing, but again, with lots of relationship building.
And in looking at the PIT count, how do you interpret the numbers that you have captured there to equate to specific number of shelter beds that we need and permanent supportive housing units and transitional housing units that we actually need? If you had to give a number, one day I call you, Shayla, how many beds do you need in a shelter? What's your answer to that question?
I would guesstimate 60 to 70 shelter beds, and Liz can push back on me if you agree.
Is that additive? Is that on top?
On top of what we, yeah.
And in
I
what
would-
combinations for like family, single?
My
blend of
qualifier
those?
is permanent overnight shelter beds.
Okay.
What's the number that is needed for the city of Charlottesville?
I'm going to say 80. And there are.
Would you say something different, or?
I'm not arguing with Shayla, no.
I'm not trying to set you up for that either.
I'm thinking about what the Salvation Army is building, and I think that even with their expansion, it serves a different part of our system, and I do think that 80 would be an accurate number.
Okay.
And that can comprise families with children as well.
And this is really a global question, but if the number of permanent supportive and traditional housing units that are needed by the groups represented in this room collectively, do we know what that number is? If I could give you control of a certain number of units of housing in those 2 categories to meet what you've individually identified, how many might that be?
Are you asking how many beds do we have total amongst all these agencies?
How many you need? How many more?
How many we
do you
need?
in those categories?
We need lots, and then as numbers continuing to grow.
I can't fund lots, but I can fund numbers. So I'm really asking to help really have you all, as the experts, diagnose what is the scope of our need.
Mr. City Manager, I'm going to also call him out, unfortunately, but Mr. Haro, last year, I believe you provided a guesstimate number. Would you mind if you can recall what that one is, and then your colleagues can add on based on this season?
Sure.
Please go to the mic, because people can't.
While he's walking up, I would say roughly 70% of the folks that use our services stay with us for a week or less at a time. So I would say around 100, because that's 30% of the number that we served.
Okay.
And also building a new shelter will just inevitably attract more people from outside of the community, so we have to account for that as well. But
Also what I'm getting at.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I wouldn't disagree with Liz either, so that makes sense. I think generally speaking, the best practice is permanent supportive housing is what's needed for at least the number of people that you know to be experiencing chronic homelessness, long-term homelessness with a disabling condition. So, but that does change over time, so you have to work that into the equation as well. But yes, I would agree with that number.
Okay, not done yet.
What was the number?
100.
100.
Okay. Rapid rehousing, is it only done by the Haven today? And then,
Yes.
I don't know if you have this answer, but you probably do because you used to work there, right?
yes.
The 2-year period of paying rent, is there a cap?
Fair market rent.
Okay. And do we have an equation as to how much that is per household?
I don't, but I
Average?
can
Okay.
get that to you.
It'd be helpful just to know what that number is. Let's see. Anna mentioned that there was a wait list for securing belongings. Do we have any sense of how many people are on that wait list?
She said there are about 80 beds and then 80 people, roughly the same amount waiting.
80
So
waiting.
about 80
I missed
people.
that. And is that overnight storage or just day storage while they're using the facility?
Overnight. It's kept in a locked office.
Ms. Washington, that can be long-term storage as well, correct?
Yes.
Do we have a sense of how long? I should have asked that too. Long-term meaning?
However, I mean, if they're staying pretty active in the day shelter, so checking in periodically, I don't know what exactly their parameters are for when they would get rid of somebody's bin, but if they haven't seen them for quite a while.
Okay. How many SOAR certified workers are you in pursuit of?
All of them. All of them. So I've been doing SOAR since 2018, and I've been the only one really doing that in our community since 2018. It's an add-on to my job. Region 10 now has someone doing SOAR with a much higher caseload than me for permanent supportive housing folks. The PATH team is training in SOAR as well. I think, though, that there is a huge need, and I would like to see at least 5 more SOAR workers kind of scattered throughout. It should be kind of built within your organization. So the hospital would be a great place for it, the school system, but any kind of social services program where you're engaging with individuals experiencing homelessness.
So that's not additional people, that's just securing the certification, therefore able to deploy that action.
So in Virginia, you only have to complete 2 SOAR claims per year to maintain your certification, but clearly we have a lot more individuals in need. It is an time-intensive process to do those claims, but it's really relationship-based, I think, is the most effective way to do that. So the more people that train, you only have to do 2 claims a year to maintain your certification. And I can't remember what the current numbers are, but just me as an add-on, I've brought in more than $40,000 a year in disability income for our clients, ongoing, and that's not including back pay.
For the Salvation Army, you did not include the warm room activity. Do you have those numbers?
I can get you those numbers.
I'd be interested in how many people are in
It's
that
included
space.
in our summary.
It's in your numbers?
Yeah, so we
Okay.
can trade.
So it's captured. Thank you. Don't want to leave you out. Affordable units, transitional units, since you're dealing with a special population, if you had that under your control, how many units might that be?
I would say the transitional units for us in particular would be really important, because we certainly find with our clients that their ability to not only overcome their situation that they find themselves in, but at the same time also find somewhere to live within 6 weeks. So oftentimes they're looking for childcare, employment and housing all within that short space of time. And that's what transitional housing offers them. It offers them that buffer. How many would we like? Oh, gosh.
To help support what you're already doing, what would you say?
You know, we'll take any more
I
than
know.
we currently have. In an ideal world, would we love, Cindy, help me, 20, 30? Could we fill them? Yes. Yes.
Okay.
We could easily fill 20, 30 units. We could probably fill more than that, truthfully, but gosh, 20 would be a blessing to start. We'd thank you for that.
That's
All
it
good?
for me.
Okay. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate it.
I've got one quick thing, I promise.
Let's
I
try to hurry
promise.
along here.
I know, this is quick, and then I'll read this. Because I know Michael summarized his theory of the case, and I'd like a brief chance to do that, because we do disagree slightly, which is fine, but on the importance of market rate housing. Increased market rate supply can drive down costs. It's been proven recently in the housing built in Austin and Minneapolis, both of which have seen rents and housing prices stabilize and decrease. The organizations presenting today have told us that folks can't use vouchers because there's not enough units available, and rapid rehousing, which uses market rate housing, can have their dollars stretch further if market rent rate is lower. I strongly believe that the housing interventions we're talking about today that drive lower income folks into safe and reliable housing can happen concurrently with allowing increased market rate housing, which ultimately can lower rents and ultimately also increases tax revenue that then can be spent on these interventions as well. So both go hand in hand. I don't think they're mutually exclusive, and I think we can vocally support additional market rate housing while supporting these causes to get more people in more housing of all types, sizes, and income levels.
And there's no argument, but to be clear, I don't think they're mutually exclusive either. I just think it's important to understand the limitations. But I agree, it's not mutually exclusive by any means.
Excellent. At this point, I think we could have a motion, please, to go into closed session.
I'll read that. Pursuant to Section 2.2-3712 of the Virginia Code, I move that this council enter closed session as permitted under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act as follows. 1, consideration of appointments to the Sister Cities Commission under Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1, and 2, discussion of and briefings regarding probable litigation and receipt of advice of legal counsel regarding the Water Street Garage under Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A7 and 2.2-3711A8.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Please vote. Okay, we will see y'all again at 6:30. Please remember that for those joining by Zoom, there is a separate link for the 6:30 meeting.